Right, brilliant. Look, thanks for giving up your time, Ben, to come along and have a chat with us on our TekCurious podcast. For those that haven't listened or heard about TekCurious, this is kind of for us at People Talent. It's about speaking with some really cool and interesting industry leaders within the sort of tech and product space on their career journey, sort of the good, the bad, the lessons they've learned, and then sort of some knowledge sharing, really, because I think one of the big challenges, as we all know, with sort of the IT space is trying to get more people to come and work in it, because there is always a lack of talent there. And I think as well, kind of talking to a number of people on these podcasts is really interesting, because we talk a lot about sort of the different entry points into technology, and actually you don't have to go through the traditional route. And there are so many other roles within the technology space that aren't just about being a software engineer or a data engineer. So I think the more light we can shine on the different career paths, the different careers, the different skill sets, I think can only but help encourage more people to kind of feel that a career in IT is a great place to come and spend their time. So do you want to give a quick intro of yourself, and then we'll kind of rewind the clock back to Bennett's sixth form before he was thinking about where to go to university?
Sure, that's a scary thought, but we can go there in a minute. Right, so yeah, hi everyone. My name's Ben Shipway. I live in and around the kind of southwest Bristol Bath area, so I've spent the majority of my career in and around that space. A short stint in London, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well. And it's great. I mean, it's just great to see the kind of tech space in and around the southwest just grow just so much over the last kind of 10, 15 years. I mean, it's afforded me the ability to work for some amazing businesses like Just Eat and like Habu Technologies, both of which, if any of your listeners are in and around the kind of Bristol Bath area, I'm sure can't help but have heard of either of those. But yeah, no, this is a great podcast. Thanks very much for having me on, and look forward to chatting.
Good, thanks, Ben. So I suppose that casting your mind back way to probably what, 1997, 1998, when you were sat there at sixth form. Was it always a career in sort of product and tech that you were wanting, or was it sort of, what am I going to do? University sounds great, because I was looking before we spoke, and underwater science at University of Plymouth, not one I've come across before, so I was just intrigued.
Right. So no, I mean, I spent the most of my sort of teenage years growing up wanting to be Jacques Cousteau. If anyone knows who that is. So marine biology, I was big into scuba diving. I've been a scuba diver since I was kind of 13, 14, as soon as I could learn. So I've been doing that a fair few years now. I won't go into how many and sort of give my age away, but big into the oceans, marine biology, big into scuba, love being on the water, on boats, all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to kind of pursue a career in oceanography, actually, and kind of marine biology. So I studied sort of chemistry, biology, and things like that at sixth form, and then went to Plymouth University to do. I mean, it was called underwater science, but essentially it's oceanography, right? It's studying everything to do with the oceans, life, physics, diving, and all that goes in there.
Fair play. So how did you end up in tech then? Because looking over your profile, right, studying the ocean, and then first job, third line support.
Yeah, I mean, these things happen, don't they, I suppose? And the short answer is I don't really know. I mean, I'm very happy that it has, right? Because I absolutely have found my niche. But I mean, it came about because as part of my course, I did a bit of kind of what they called computer programming. And I think most people nowadays would absolutely laugh if I told you actually what it was. Let's not go into that. But we did a bit of computer programming type work as part of my degree course. And at the time I left university thinking, well, what am I going to do? Actually, there's not a huge number of jobs, and certainly not a huge number of well-paid jobs in the kind of ocean science arena. And I kind of flirted with a few different bits, including looking at things like doing a doctorate and things like that. But I mean, I was just keen to earn money, right? I hadn't done the gap year thing. I hadn't had a year out. I hadn't been traveling like a lot of my friends had done. And I was just keen to just get on the job, on the career ladder, effectively. My brother-in-law at the time worked for a business, local business, who built software for, of all things, pensions administration. And they were looking for someone, and it just happened to coincide with what I'd done at university in terms of languages and things like that. So I thought I'll do that and kind of see where it goes. So yeah, did ocean science straight into pensions administration software, as you do, which feels like such a weird progression, obviously. But no, I mean, it was great. And, it certainly gave me the first taste of working in the tech type space, right? And I think plays to what you were saying at the beginning, you absolutely don't have to have, a traditional tech degree. I mean, when I'm recruiting for people, that isn't, yes, it's useful, but in reality, and we'll talk about more about this later, it's much more about approach, it's much more about application, it's much more about attitude for me than it is any particular kind of qualification set. And so I sort of did that. I ended up working for a nice company, good culture, a bunch of nice people. I got really into what I was doing. And over the sort of following 14, 15 years I spent in that business, sort of worked my way up. So I really did sort of fall into it and start at the bottom, so to speak.
Fair play. One of the things we'll get, because like you said in the intro, right, you've worked for some really kind of big and well-known companies, kind of sort of huge big corporates, I guess, and sort of companies probably the likes of Just Eat that were much smaller that grew over the period of time you were there. But like looking over your LinkedIn profile and talking to you over the years, it's kind of, I guess, you've always done quite good long stints at organisations. And I suppose, do you think that, I mean, what are your, was that intentional? Was it kind of, right, okay, I'm going to stay for this period of time, get to this position, then move to get the next promotion, or were you kind of tapped on the shoulder? Or I suppose, and again, the other one just to throw into that was, again, I might be wrong here, so correct me if I am, but kind of the role back at ProFund looked like it was more of a consulting sort of consultancy type firm, and I guess getting out and speaking with other businesses, but most of the other ones you worked have always been sort of internally facing IT. So what's your take? Was that all been intentional, or what's your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I've been sort of giving some thought to this in terms of kind of potential advice and things, and I think to a certain extent, I absolutely didn't necessarily have a kind of career path mapped out for me. I never set out thinking I want to be a chief product officer one day or a chief tech officer. I just enjoyed what I was doing, and through a bit of luck, obviously, through application, through hard work, through having a passion for what I was doing, I suppose, I just had opportunities over the course of of my career, but also within each business I've been in, to kind of take on new things, identify new areas that I was interested to learn about. I'm quite an inquisitive person naturally. I like the theory. I like to kind of understand the context and kind of explore what could be done more, what's around that's affecting it, what else could I do, what else could I learn about. And so I think that's naturally kind of kept me to a certain extent on the move. But you mentioned it just then, like I hadn't, I did a really long stint in my first business, which was that sort of financial services company that I joined. They were later acquired by a company called Jardine Lloyd Thompson. I think they've been acquired by Mercer. But I did sort of 14, 15-ish years there. And was that by design? No. There were constantly changing landscapes and constantly changing opportunities that kept me interested. But I hadn't planned on staying there that long. In fact, one of the drivers for me to leave and kind of make the jump from that business was the fact that it was the kind of industry where people did, and probably still are, some of the people that I work with are probably still there, because it was the kind of business where you went in and you worked there for your career. And 15 years in, I sort of thought, I think I've sort of maxed out what I'm going to do here. I'm looking for the next thing. I don't think I'm going to get it here. And so I thought, right, now's the time, but none of those things were necessarily by design. I've sort of, always been looking out on the periphery for what's next, what other opportunities are available. But I think really, those chances, those opportunities are made available to if you apply yourself and you go willing and you're open and you're working hard and clearly sort of enjoying what you're doing, I suppose.
No, that's good. And I suppose, look, I guess I've worked in recruitment for a number of years now. When I probably first started out in recruitment, right, anyone who probably hadn't done a minimum of 3-4 years in an organization, if they were perm, you'd kind of be going, oh, you can't be moving before that there's something not quite right there.
Right.
And I suppose on the other end, if someone had probably done the amount of time you did in that one organization, probably over the 10 years plus, I guess clients would always ask us, well, are they a bit institutionalized? Are they going to be able to change, and are they going to move on? So for that latter part, we'll delve into that a bit. So do you think that's true? Did you think that not inhibited you, but maybe held you back a little bit when you were trying to move on from JLT? Did you come up against it? Or someone who'd been there for that sort of period of time you had, do you think that's just a load of rubbish? And because actually businesses are always so fast paced and always changing, it doesn't really make any difference anyway?
No, I think certainly in what I would class JLT as is quite an old school financial institution. It was the kind of business, for example, where you went to the London office and you weren't allowed to wear brown shoes to the office because it was in the city, and you don't wear brown shoes in the city, right? You wear black shoes in the city. You're a finance company. So it was that kind of business, right? So it was quite old school in that regard. That was a massive eye opener to me. I didn't even know that kind of thing existed, right? But so it's quite old school. I sort of feel like absolutely I was quite institutionalized. And I'm not 100% certain what it was that sort of woke me up to that, other than the fact that I just remember thinking one day and having a conversation with my wife and thinking, I can do more. They're not utilizing me. They're not getting the most out of me. I've got more to give. I don't think this is going to happen. And it was a massive risk to leave JLT after all that time. It was such a comfort zone. I literally knew I know everyone in the business. It was a big company, but knew everyone. I was leading their software development function at the time, interacting with the board, and it was. I'd created a position for myself there, and actively and emotionally looking at how I leave that comfort zone, that comfort blanket, was really challenging. But I think I knew deep down, I knew logically that I had to do that. I was quite fortunate in that regard because I left to work for a business that knew me because we had previously worked together as a supplier to JLT. So they knew what I was getting, I knew them, and I knew what I was getting. So I was very fortunate in the sense that I didn't have to go completely, jump in at the deep end with an unknown business, with an unknown, new career path, with an unknown everything. It was quite lucky, really. It was quite fortunate.
Good. And I guess when you made that decision to kind of leave JLT, was there a clear plan then of kind of, right, okay, I'm here as head of delivery, I want to get to that kind of CTO, CPO kind of role, and there's a time frame I've got to do that, and this is a plan of how I'm going to get there? Or was it kind of actually more about, well, I've done a good stint here, I fancy something different, let's see what's out there?
It was much more the latter, and I think I can't stress enough that I think talking about things like career goals, career aspirations, career plans. I've been kind of reflecting ahead of this chat, and I think my honest answer to all those is I didn't really have one, and honestly, I still don't really, or at least my career plan and aspirations are not born or not built around wanting to achieve a particular position. I definitely didn't join JLT thinking I want to be head of delivery or head of analysis or whatever. I definitely didn't leave JLT thinking, right, well, now's my opportunity to leave and become a CPO or whatever it is. It was much more about, to a certain extent, I don't think you can rush those things. I think if you try and force, trying to get that next promotion, wanting to climb the ladder too early, I think that is worse in the long run for you. And so I suppose I would encourage anyone, to kind of do what I've done, which is not put the time in, but try not to force it, learn, do different things, understand the pressures on the product role by doing a delivery secondment for a few months, or doing an engineering secondment, and vice versa. Whatever your discipline is, really try and understand life on the other side of the fence. And so I left JLT, went to work for an outsourced IT services business, which was very sort of similar to what I'd been doing, in the sense that I was putting together multidisciplinary development teams, building products, but it was on behalf of an external customer. So we did some work for some big FTSE 100 businesses. But as part of that, it enabled me to sort of understand and take on a bit more of an account management role. Now, that, honestly was not something I particularly enjoyed. I'm not, I enjoy delivery, and I'm a people person, and I enjoy the conversation. I enjoy collaborating with people. And so it was very much about, growing partnerships. It wasn't a sales role, which is great. But what that role really did enable me to do is realize, again, okay, well, I've done that. I've got some great experience about, commercial forecasting, about partnerships, about account management. But actually, that's great. But where my heart is and where my focus wants to be in future is, back running internal product delivery teams. And therefore, I sort of course corrected based on that. And that brought me back to Just Eat.
I'll come back to the Just Eat bit in a second, because I'm keen just to poke around on that questions. But I suppose it's really interesting listening to you talking about kind of that the account management part gave you some more exposure to the commercial element of a business, and sort of actually how some of the stuff outside technology kind of works within an organization. Because a number of people we've had on these podcasts have done similar things to that kind of that operate at that kind of C level, but they actually place a lot of value in kind of going, well, actually, it was really interesting to just step away for a bit, not necessarily step away, it's the wrong choice of words, but to have some extra exposure to things, not just IT focused, but actually around that account management, the commercial part. Do you think that has helped you get to that kind of board level, the C-suite level role quicker? Or maybe not quicker, but has it made you a better person to operate at that level because you have that broader understanding, or doesn't already make a difference?
No, I think without a shadow of doubt, 100% it's helped. And that's what I say about, understand the different disciplines as part of the product and tech. We're talking primarily about kind of technology functions here, but yeah, I mean, that helps me as an account, having been an account manager for a while, understand the pressures on that role. So now when I'm dealing with, commercial teams, account management teams, sales functions, I feel their pain. I've been there, I've done it. And, our roles are very different and, often antagonistic. But I think, understanding their motivation, their context, and that's encouraged me to share more about my motivation and my context. And that is how I think you bridge that gap between kind of different functions in a business that are often, at loggerheads.
Good answer. No, I don't find it, because it seems to be almost half. It seems to be a 50-50 split, right, Ben, between half the people have kind of either gone down more of that like account management type, had some of that experience, who now operate at the C level, or they've kind of gone out contracting for a period of their career, and they've kind of said, whilst actually they're being a contractor, that gives you a very different perspective and set of kind of skills, in the fact that if you're a contractor, you're expected to land on day one and be contributing significantly, probably by halfway through, if not before, of day one, because you're not adding the value you need to get. And both people have said, look, actually having those two extra set of skills, whilst quite different, but I guess kind of similar in some ways, has helped them and made them, well, they feel made them better to operate at that level. But I suppose, look, the Just Eat bit I was keen to ask is kind of, I suppose, look, Just Eat is probably one of the best known tech success stories that we've had in the UK, right? And constantly, like, I live my life on LinkedIn, and anyone who's ever worked at Just Eat, you always see like ex Just Eat employer. And look, I mean, in Bristol, right? I've recruited in Bristol for a long time, and if you could get your hands on anyone that had worked at Just Eat, you'd be rubbing your hands together, thinking, brilliant! Every company's going to want to have a chat with this person. So I suppose, first of all, how did you get the role at Just Eat? Did you just see it and apply for it? Was it a case, or did you get tapped on the shoulder? Or was it an intentional decision? Right, this company look like they're going places, and actually I want to be part of that. And if I can be part of that, I probably know I'm going to get some really good experience and exposure.
So no, I mean, I hadn't really considered the long-term impact of having held some senior positions at Just Eat. That only became apparent sort of later down the line, I guess, when I saw other, heads of, directors, whatever, leave the business and go on to like really, really amazing things. And so I hadn't done that, and I guess, again, this comes back to, I hadn't really planned it out that way. What I guess I was looking for, and I knew people at Just Eat, some people that had worked for me at JLT had moved over to Just Eat as product managers, as business analysts, and so on. And so I knew a few people there already, and I knew that it was a great place to work. They've got a bar in the office, and they've got a pool table, and oh my God, it's like Google, which for me, coming from a very old school kind of financial services company background, I'm just like, oh my God, we used to have a thing where on a Friday they'd let you not wear a tie. So this was like nirvana, right? And so, it had a reputation in Bristol, and everyone who seemed to go there were the good people. And I didn't get tapped on the shoulder officially, but the person whose role I took over was, expressed their desire to leave the business and was kind of leaving. I didn't know them. Some people in his team, that person's team, approached me and said, like, I think you'd be really good for this position. And so, facilitated like an initial conversation. So it was a bit like my latest role, and I'm sure we'll get onto that later, but it was one of those businesses where it just had such a great reputation for hard work, for fun, for excellence, for really, really good corporate cultural values that I still, they really did live by, and I still hold very dear. But it was one of those places where you just walked in and you were like, and I anyway certainly felt like, yeah, this is right for me. I just knew when I walked through the door that it just had that vibe. It had that everyone's there, everyone's good at what they do, everyone is motivated to work together to do the best thing. There was very little, I'll say no, but there's very little ego. There was, it's quite a flat structure. And it was just a very collaborative and sort of autonomous place to work. I mean, you had real autonomy to own your role and get stuff done, which I guess is super important in such a scaled business, because you can't be autocratic in that kind of environment.
No, I've never worked there, but yeah, I've spoken to lots of people who have, and yeah, everybody loved their time there, and yeah, it was
Right.
it was held in very high regard.
Yeah. And so now I have put Just Eat on my thing, so apologies, I'm one of those people.
I don't blame you. And I suppose, well, I'll come back to that in a little bit later. But and then obviously Just Eat to Haboo, right? I remember sat there on LinkedIn when it flashed up, seeing Ben's gone to Haboo, and I was thinking, wow, okay. So I suppose what big move to move from kind of the powerhouse that is Just Eat, right? Everyone knows who they are, and if in Bristol, we all kind of know who Haboo are. If you like rugby or football, you probably know who Haboo are.
Right.
But I suppose outside of that, they were relatively kind of unknown, but had a really cool story, really cool kind of journey and vision of where they wanted to get to. And so I suppose not big jump to go, and you got your C-level role, and I suppose maybe a bit of a spiky question, but hey, it's a podcast, I guess. Was that part of the allure to kind of get that C-level role, or what was the reason? I suppose from someone looking at it, you go Just Eat, big company, Haboo, different company to Just Eat.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, right? So I'll do my best to be as succinct as possible, which is, anyone who knows me, is not my strength, right? As you probably already realised from this so far. It was a really difficult decision, and not for probably the reasons that you think. It was a really difficult decision because I'd spent the preceding 4 years at Just Eat in two roles, both of which kind of building teams, building functions in such a great environment that I've sort of alluded to earlier. It was really difficult to leave, not because I was worried about what was next, but because part of you just didn't want to leave. Right? It was just great space, great environment, great business. And I still, very much look back on my time at Just Eat as being, to a certain extent, the glory days for me, because that was really where I think, having left the financial services business, having worked in a role that was super enjoyable and I absolutely loved, for a business that was amazing called Endava. I felt like I found my groove at Just Eat. That was like I'd hit the, I'd kind of had a go at a few things, and then I'd hit the sweet spot, so to speak. So it was super good, and I think that I built up a good reputation at Just Eat for the right things and the right reasons. So it was really difficult to leave. Was the C-level thing a lure? Yeah, of course it was. Yeah, absolutely. I'll be completely honest with you. And in particular, the fact that it was a combined product and tech C-level role was super attractive to me. The roles that I'd done previously at Just Eat were kind of combined product and tech. Head of fintech was product tech engineering all together, operations, commercial support, the whole thing. So, and I think this is probably one of the things that interests me the most, and that's the difference between the kind of micro macro situation that you've got. So you look at you look at products, for example, let's talk about product management, but you look at the micro, the individual products, how do you optimize for KPIs, OKRs, high performing products, successful product. But then you've got multiple products in your overall portfolio as business. So then the macro becomes, well, how do those all interplay together? And I think that's true of both product, of discipline by discipline. So, optimizing product management as a team, optimizing engineering as a function. Well, okay, then the macro is, how do those two work well together? And then wider as well, like, business disciplines like commercial, working with product and tech, working with operations. So to be able to do what I thought was a natural evolution of my role, which I didn't see myself being able to achieve it Just Eat, because it was very product tech and separate to the very top. For a, you can probably tell from my accent, right? I'm kind of Bristol born and bred, and so you might pick up the West Country twang. But to work for a business that started in Bristol and Bath, who had a real passion for technology, who invested in their tech, who built all their own tech in-house, and who were on track to be a tech unicorn at some point, and to be able to lead that function and, from my perspective, do it to my values and do it what I would consider to be, right, was just such a great opportunity. It was an awesome opportunity. So did I want to leave Just Eat? No, not really. But the opportunity at Habu was just amazing, right? Yeah. I could not have, and I'm sure you'll ask me for advice and things later, but I teach my kids, and I try to live by this in my own life. I'd rather regret something I've done than something I haven't, and so I would have rather left. And to a certain extent, leaving JLT successfully, that sort of gave me confidence a bit in this kind of stuff. But I'd absolutely rather give something a go, it not work out, and think, at least I tried, than sit there and spend the rest of my career thinking, what if, like, what would have happened if I'd done that? Because the safe thing to do would absolutely to have been to stay at Just Eat.
And I suppose you kind of answered my next question, right? But I'll kind of ask it, and then maybe we can discuss it a little bit. But I guess, look, it's kind of the risk reward, right, of going to a business like Habu, well-funded, super ambitious plans. If that pays off, that can be a life-changing event that occurs for the people that are at that level, right? Which I'm guessing you were. But I suppose kind of those events occurring, I guess, are very, very slim, right?
Right.
And I was sorry, Ben. There we go. I'm back. So yeah, those events occurring are slim, right? But I guess, is there any regret? Would you do the same again? Would you go to another business like that looks great, and for whatever reason maybe it doesn't come to fruition, or actually now where you are, the next move into another bigger because I suppose one of the questions I get asked a lot from people that were kind of in your shoes at Just Eat, it's a big decision, right? Because you sit there kind of go, I've got a family, I've got a mortgage, I've got a really successful, lovely job, and I'm very well remunerated, and it's a safe place to be. It challenges me and I'm growing, but I've got this tap on my shoulder, Karl, about X opportunity, or I'm speaking to someone about it and they're going, oh, it sounds great, but the risk could be massive, but the reward also could be. So I suppose somebody who's been there, done it, would you do it again? And what would your advice be to someone who was sat in your shoes when you were at Just Eat thinking about it?
Oh, so absolutely, I did again. I don't regret the move at all. Yeah, I mean, I haven't been able to fulfill the goals and aspirations that I was, or the ambition of the role that I was taking on to do it, Habu. But that's fine. I mean, part of that is about kind of rolling with the changes to a certain extent, and we all have to do that. You know, be that a new role that you've taken on, a new business, or changing organizational structures in the company that you're within. I'm sure most people have been part of some kind of reorg of a business at some point, and roles change, and you have to kind of roll with that. So to a certain extent, no. I mean, I absolutely would. I'd encourage people to do it. Not that I would want to encourage people, anyone out there, to take, undue risk, financial risk. But I guess to a certain extent, if you believe in it enough, and you believe in yourself, and you feel like it's what you want, then you don't feel like it's that much of a risk. And I certainly didn't feel, that I was sort of moving from something super secure to something, that isn't secure. Like, I just, that thought hadn't really crossed my mind. I felt bad that I was leaving something that I'd worked really hard at Just Eat to create, a great team of people, and I didn't want to not be part of that anymore. I suppose that was the thing for me. Would I work for another business like Habu? Absolutely. I mean, it's great fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not advocating for small businesses in that stage. I'm not advocating for large corporates. I think, for me anyway, it's much more about feeling like I'm having a positive impact. I've got value. I fit with the company culturally. My experience is relevant, and I'm able to affect change. Much more driven by that than it being a particular domain or a particular size business, or a particular business, at a certain stage of its evolution.
Makes sense. Good answer. I was intrigued to ask, so thank you for being so honest.
No worries.
I suppose kind of then just flipping on its head, right? So obviously, I guess you've hired probably lots and lots of people over the years, right, in the different roles you've been in. And I'm probably guessing maybe back sort of in your earlier days, sort of where you were, I guess it's kind of the people you brought in probably were, I guess, maybe coming more through a traditional route. They'd been to university, maybe they'd done a computer science degree or a science or mathematics related degree, and then were sort of looking for their first kind of entry point into technology. And look, that is a great way, and there's still plenty of people doing that now. So again, like, not to say that's a positive thing to do, but I guess there are a lot of other ways now that necessarily you don't have to come through university. And again, I think kind of post-COVID now, there's a lot of people that have thinking or wanting to change careers, or have seen sort of technology actually now as sort of a really stable, that's probably a bit over a statement, isn't it? But a stable career path and sector to work in that's maybe not affected as much by some of the global economics as maybe some other sectors are. So I suppose what's your take on somebody who's wanting to get into tech, who for whatever reason hasn't been to university, can't go to university? Because there's things like apprenticeships, boot camps, and I guess kind of, I suppose maybe in some of the world you look after, in I guess more of that product and sort of agile space, maybe, when necessarily you don't have to be kind of an academic, great at kind of problem solving sort of numerically. So what's your take on that, Ben, as someone who's building these teams as we speak, I guess?
Yeah, sure. No, I think it's a great question. Obviously, there are roles within the kind of multidisciplinary product, tech, engineering, data, data space, perhaps more so, where you need that sort of, you need the right mindset. You need a bit more of a kind of analytical, numbers driven. I don't want to say academic, because that's not necessarily what I mean, but you need to be able to kind of get to work in that space, I suppose. Generally speaking, though, you're absolutely right. I, for one, clearly didn't do a technology-led degree. I fell into a tech career, and to a certain extent, I would encourage anyone to not necessarily focus on being the top 1% expert, theoretical expert in a given field. Agile is one that's often talked about. People implement Scrum, the Scrum Manifesto, verbatim from the book. And I think very often you learn that it's more about pragmatism and collaboration and understanding each other and working together to achieve better outcomes than it is about knowing off by heart a particular, I'm picking on the Scrum Manifesto now and I shouldn't, but for example, that it's more about application and aptitude and approach for me than it is about academic expertise. Obviously, as I say, with the caveat that some roles are particular, you need that grounding.
But I think there are plenty,
or whatever it might be.
Exactly, and I think there are plenty of roles out there that necessarily, if you don't work in tech or know somebody that works in tech, you probably are even aware that there are brilliant careers out there within tech that aren't those type of roles. And from my perspective, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think tech and technology and sort of technology firms or technology practices within firms are probably some of the most flexible teams and organizations there are in terms of kind of like working hours, working remotely, working flexibly. So actually kind of trying to encourage more people into these careers from underrepresented backgrounds. It's a really, really great place to come and build a career. But I think the more we can talk about it and show that there are these things out there, so things like we said, sort of around, I guess even some of the degrees sort of around the product piece and some of the agile bit and scrum masters, and yeah, look, if you've come from a technical background, some of those roles, again, clearly that you need to do it, but actually from like the BA side and things like that, it's about being kind of inquisitive and being able to ask the right questions and having really good people skills. So you may have come from a completely different background, but actually you've got a young family, you've got to be able to do the school run, you need to go to work from home a few days a week to look after the kids. Well, then there's plenty of spaces for people like that. And I think the more diversity we can encourage into it, the better, as I'm sure you'll probably agree, the better that makes the team.
No, absolutely. And I think there's an element, I mean, the inquisitive mindset was something I was thinking when you said it. So that's exactly, I 100% agree with that. There is an element here though of, I think in the tech space, it feels like it still feels like something new, something cool, something that is possibly out of reach of a lot of people that haven't worked in that space before, who think, oh my God, no, I could never do that. And actually, tech people like the fact they work in tech, right? There's definitely a tech type, and I'm one of them, right? So no issue there. But to a certain extent, we could probably demystify a lot of this stuff quite a bit, because yes, there is funky terminology and stuff to learn, of course, about how all this hangs together and how it works and what the different roles are and what they mean, and there's a lot of jargon, a lot of terminology, a lot of things that day-to-day people just don't come across, like Scrum and Kanban and what have you, and DevOps and all the rest of it. But in reality, when you break that down and demystify it, Scrum mastering, engineering, product management, business analysis is just a slightly different application of skills that we all have to some degree or another. And so, agile and traditional project management are the two that obviously just spring to mind instantly. A traditional project or program manager going, oh, I just don't get this agile thing. Well, it's the same stuff cut differently, right? Different approach, different mechanism, but ultimately the aims are exactly the same. The goals that you're aiming for are exactly the same. So I think we could probably demystify some of that and break that down a little bit. The barrier to entry probably shouldn't be as high as it is.
No, I agree. And I'm sure you've probably got some examples of this. But again, a number of the people we've had on this podcast have sort of look, some of the best people I've ever hired over the years haven't come through those traditional routes. They haven't been to, like, some of the best software engineers I've ever hired haven't gone through university. Some of the best BAs I've hired, I've gone and plucked them out of a completely different part of the business. They never really thought about a career in technology. I've brought them in and they've gone on to do amazing things.
Totally. Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
And I think it's just about, the more we talk about it and the more kind of we say, look, come and get involved, go and speak to people, go and speak to the IT department in your organization, and kind of, because I'm sure as kind of the CPTO, I think I got it right. I guess, look, if you had somebody come up to you when you were grabbing a coffee from the, I don't know, the customer service help desk from sales, said, oh, Ben, look, I really love this and I've been looking at it, but I don't know how would I start? I mean, how would you react to that? Would you go away, you don't work in tech, go away, or actually would you kind of quite like those conversations?
Now, I think there's an opportunity here, and I think, one of the questions that you sent me was about how I kind of stay up to date with, new technology, new theory, new ideas, and I think the main answer to that is you need to get, and I enjoy anyway, and I think how I learn is that theoretical application of lots of different viewpoints. And so in order to do that, you have to get lots of different viewpoints. And so, very often you get someone new come into the business and point to something and go, well, why are you doing that? You go, oh yeah, like I hadn't, of course, like that doesn't make sense, does it? But we were doing it because like we'd all just silently, subconsciously agreed that that's what we were doing. And actually, very often bringing in new people to business is great because it widens the ideas pool. It provides, diversity of points of view and opinions, but not just from, other product managers, if that's what we're talking about here, or other engineers from other businesses, people who are new to that function, who can come in with a completely fresh mindset and kind of really challenge it. So no, I mean, like, I think if anyone says, no, stop, you're not a techie person, I think they should probably feel ashamed of themselves. That's really not the approach, right? We absolutely want to encourage more different and varied people into the conversation, because I think it's through that conversation. One of my other sayings, I've got loads of these sayings, the conversation for me is the interesting thing, not the result. I think that's the thing that we should be driving.
Good. And then last question before the quick fire ones, Ben. You've got some brilliant stuff to talk about. But I suppose that one of the things that gets talked about a lot more than ever did, and I think it's a really good thing, is kind of around burnout, work-life balance, and I guess that someone who kind of operates at the level you do, you've got a family, so you've kind of got big responsibilities on kind of both shoulders, right? How do you kind of balance that kind of work and personal life, and sort of what tips have you got for people to kind of share with it? Because I'm sure you've got some great mechanisms.
I've got loads of sayings. How do I approach this? So, there's the old kind of living to work, working to live thing, which I don't really subscribe to, because I don't think either of those things are great. Right. I love my career. I love what I do. And I think if you don't love what you do, then that's a real challenge. I love what I do. And the danger is that I get consumed and, absorbed and it becomes all consuming in it. For me, I think it's about like a really nice blended balance. Like personally, I've never had a problem, having a look at my emails in the evening. Not because I feel like that's expected of me, because I don't think anyone, and hopefully no one who's worked for me has felt that way, that I've put that pressure on them. But I don't mind, because I like to keep up to date. I find that stopping, it's that whole kind of going on holiday for a week, coming back and having that catch up mentality. So I would rather, always be in the conversation, keep up to date with it. But I think the flip side of that is then there's give and take on both sides. So, for me, I've got a young family, so I would always prefer into work fairly sharpish, leave it 4:30, 5 o'clock, get home so that I could see my kids before, they're home from school, they have their tea, spend some time with the family. And then if I needed to, I'd log back on again a bit later on and just kind of finish off a few bits or whatever. But it's a challenge, because I was always one of those people, even at my role at Abu and at Just Eat, where I would be finishing at 5 on the dot. And very often, people stay in the office till late, they work late, and if that's what works for them, absolutely great. I think the danger comes when that's an expectation and not driven out of your own desire to, want to continue. And it was important for me to stop and say, right, I need family time, see my kids, spend time with my wife, and then, if I need to do more later, I can do. But making sure there's a real kind of, you need to pay both sides. Yeah, absolutely, it's super important. And I think the other thing, in terms of just kind of working efficiently, I'm definitely a quality, not quantity kind of person. And that's a tip for me is, I sit at my desk here quite often, and I'll be working away, and I tend to be most productive in the morning. So now would be my most productive period. So at the beginning of every day, sit down, and I have time at the start of the day to structure my day. I have time at the end of the day to finish up anything I need to, or correspondence or communication. And then I have certain elements of, meetings throughout the day, of course, but areas that I really put aside for kind of deep work, where I close Slack and I close email and I close everything. And I time that for where I know I'm most effective, which is typically in the morning. And I guess if I'm here and I'm working, and I think we've all been in that situation where you sit there and you're just thinking, like, this just isn't happening. Like, just get up and walk away. Like, I think you just need that break from it. It's not about flogging it. It's about utilizing your peaks and troughs of mental energy and when you're productive. So, like, really, really start to get a feel for when you're productive, when you're not, when it's working, when it isn't, and try not to force it. Because I think, we've all done more in 10 minutes some days than we do in 2 hours the next day. So try and harness that, I guess. You'll be super productive and probably work less hours.
That's really good advice. I think, turning off Slack, turning off your emails, and actually giving yourself a dedicated period of time to have a laser focus on something is brilliant, because I guess there's that always a kind of always connected element, isn't there? Do you know what I mean? And an email pops up, or your phone goes off, or you get a message. It's so easy to kind of think, oh, well, I'm going to go lose 10 minutes on that. And then I guess trying to get back into the flow of what you're doing, all of a sudden you've probably lost 20, 25 minutes.
Especially if you're working remotely as well. You can spend, I remember when the pandemic hit, we were all working at home. All those conversations that you'd walk past someone's desk in the office and talk to them, you now had to book a 30-minute meeting for. Because it kind of felt rude just to call someone for 2 seconds and then hang up, right? Which, and so, you'd spend all day, every day, all day in meetings, and then, like, you'd never get any work done. You'd never actually do something, producing something, and that's fine depending on your role. That might be what you need to do, of course, but absolutely, block time, and focus on it, and be really clear with everyone what you're doing.
Good, I like that. And one of the other bits of advice, I think, keen to get your opinion from one of the podcasts we did last week. It was really interesting. It was a lady who's a CTO for a fintech, and she works from home predominantly most of the time. And she was saying, I'm really, really disciplined about it. This is my office in my house. My laptop stays in here. I do my work in here. My laptop does not follow me anywhere else around the house. And religiously, I'll close the door of my office, and as soon as the door's closed, that's work done. And I found it really interesting, because I'm guilty. I'll sit on the sofa with my laptop. I'll sit at the kitchen table with my laptop. I'll sit in the office with my laptop, and it kind of follows me around the house. And I find it really hard to kind of have that clean line between work, personal life. So I guess what's your take on that? Or are you very good at being disciplined?
No, I'm probably not as good at being disciplined as the lady you're talking about there, but I think that's great. I love that idea. I think that's a great approach. It's really difficult. I mean, the office where I sit here in the house is kind of in the middle of the house, so it's really easy to walk through and kind of you know, as you're walking through with a cup of tea or something of an evening, like your laptop will bing and you'll go, oh, what's that? You know, oh, I want to go to tea. So yeah, be really disciplined, shut it down, turn off notifications. You know, I for one, for example, and you know, sometimes I do catch up with things in the evening, but I always say to everyone who I work with and in my team, yeah, I may send you messages in the evening because that's when it occurs to me, oh, I must speak to, you know, so and so about that subject or catch up or whatever. I never expect a response in the evening. So
that's really good.
Don't reply. I mean, obviously you can delay send messages and things like that, but yeah, I think, you know, being open with your team, your peers, your reports, your colleagues as to how you work and how they want to work, which is perhaps a conversation that people don't really have very often. Actually, I'm really productive in the morning, so please don't schedule anything in the morning. Let's do all our meetings in the afternoon. And if you get me emails from me in the evening, just ignore them to the morning.
Yeah.
Like,
that's really good.
You know, and then you cut through that expectation of, oh, Ben's emailed me, or you know, he keeps declining my meetings, you know, because they're in the morning. Yeah. So even a kind of frank conversation can be super useful, I think.
Good. Thank you for that. Right, the quick fire questions to keep you on your toes.
Okay.
Some of them are a bit obvious. One of them's obvious. Two of them are a bit of fun. So the first one is everything you've learned over your career. If you could go back to Ben finishing his university degree and giving one piece of advice, what would you go back and tell yourself?
Yeah, I think it's about kind of enjoying the moment. You know, don't stress about what's next. Spend time, you know, slow down, I guess, to a certain extent. I think tech businesses, and the qualification for that is, in particular in tech, we tend to just get on this thing of, oh, if I'm not getting a promotion every 2 years, if I'm not moving, if I'm not doing something different, then there must be something wrong. And I think, you know, there are businesses that really actively drive that. But I just think, you know, take it as it comes. Yes, understand the like have a look around, but invest in what you're currently doing. Because for me, I want to get to the top by building underneath rather than pulling myself up. If that does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. I like that. I like that analogy. I might steal that one. That's a good one.
All right.
Good. Next one. So, if you could learn any skill or subject instantly, what would it be and why?
Oh, that's a great question. I think some of the more ethereal soft skills that people talk about when you perhaps get more into senior positions, so director level positions, C-level positions, you know, influence, persuasion. You know, I'm not suggesting I just want to be able to make people do what I want them to do, but you know, these are all things that I absolutely haven't cracked yet. And so, you know, I think it's a constant learning journey. So, you know, help with that would be great, because some of those things are really difficult and really, really difficult to do well. And so I think that's probably, you know, one of the areas of me that I still think needs, I mean, amongst plenty of others, I'm sure, but still needs some work, and I feel like I'd like to get better at. So yeah,
I've not had that answer before, and I like that one. That is a good answer, to be fair. So no, I like that. And then the final one, right? I always caveat this saying you can't say AI. If you have to say AI, it has to be a really, really good answer. So what's the most innovative or game-changing technology you've come across recently, and how do you think it's going to impact society in the future?
That's a great question. I mean, everyone obviously automatically goes to AI, don't they? What do I think? You know, I'm a car guy, so it's not a tech. It's sort of tech, but it's not really tech.
Yeah,
right? You probably noticed over my shoulder, right? So I like my cars, and so I think we've got a challenging future that you know, obviously the future of motoring is electric, and so what I would like to see is technology developed that enables us to keep the kind of the emotional side of motoring, with the sort of cleanliness, you know, whether that be man-made fuels, whether it be, you know, whatever, I don't know. I don't think we've got that cracked yet. And so, you know, I know there's quite a few quite cool, innovative solutions out there, not specifically in the tech space, but considering you said I can't say AI, then that's probably the one that I'm kind of most interested in keeping an eye on over the next sort of 5-10 years or so.
That'd be good. And I agree. I think, yeah, I like a car, and hearing these electric ones driving by, just one of my friends has got an electric one, and they kind of pump the sound of a normal car through the speakers into it. And I've been in, I kind of go, it just doesn't quite feel right in a weird way. But yeah, hopefully they get it sorted.
I mean, I like an electric car, don't get me wrong. I think it's great. They're great fun to drive. They're super useful and good to run. I mean, and maybe we're showing our age here, Karl, but for me anyway, there's something so you know, evocative about a kind of internal combustion engine. If we can find a way to keep that and still be green, carbon neutral, then that would be amazing.
Good answer. I like that one. Again, I've not had that one before, Ben. So I like you've not gone down the obvious route, and you've given some good answers to the quick fire one. So thank you for that.
Okay, great.
But look, massively appreciate, Ben, your time. I've really enjoyed listening to you. I think there's been some really cool takeaways that I think a lot of the listeners will really enjoy. So look, huge thank you for giving up an hour of your time to come and talk to us.
No worries. Thanks ever so much for having me. It's been great fun. Thanks, Karl.